Why did the Russian military switch from the proven reliable AK-74M to the new AK-12 as their primary rifle for their rank-and-file soldiers? The AK series is basically about as Russian as vodka or Dostoevsky. Actually, all those things really pair well together. How has the new rifle performed in combat so far, based on early reports from the front lines in Ukraine? It might seem strange to switch platforms, especially since the new one fires the same exact 545mm ammo and the same exact magazine with similar rates of fire. But I think it's more complicated than simply comparing weapon stats one to one, because once you pop open the hood, you start to realize the AK-12 was originally meant to be delivered as one single part of a much larger whole. It was a component of the major overhaul of the Russian infantry modernization program called Ratnik. It's like Aristotle famously said, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But was the Russian Ministry of Defense actually able to successfully roll out those upgrades? And are the rumors true about the AK-12 needing to get a complete redesign after poor soldier feedback from their experiences fighting in Ukraine? Since the start of Russia's war in Ukraine, the AK-12 is now often seen in a very unintended role. It's used as a trophy weapon by the Ukrainian leadership, especially for media appearances. The AK-12 has reportedly become a very highly sought-after battlefield prize. According to the Warzone's writer Oliver Parkin, Ukrainian soldiers don't just want it for its enhanced combat capabilities, they also want it for what possessing one symbolizes. An AK-12 symbolizes that they were able to capture Russia's best weapon. From Ukraine's point of view, it symbolizes victory and defiance in the face of a more powerful, larger invading force. When Ukrainian leaders were looking for ways to visually show strength against Russia, this was an early go-to method for them. For example, Vitaly Kim, the governor of Mykolaiv Oblast, was seen in his office with a captured AK-12. Then, the Ukrainian chief of defense intelligence was also seen with a seized AK-12. Displaying small arms in this kind of way is a practice that has a lot of historical precedence and dates way back. You might remember how in World War II, the German Luger pistol was a prized weapon to capture. In some instances, there's a level of respect for a soldier to capture the enemy's best engineered weapons. In ancient Rome, military victories were commemorated with a display of captured arms and standards. The captured Russian AK-12 has become a kind of propaganda piece turned back around against Russia. Before we get into how the rifle is performed in combat, I also have a trophy AK-12 in my office, except it's a mini goat gun version. And the first thing people ask me when they see it on my Love Me shelf is, "Whoa, does it actually shoot like real bullets?" And I tell them no. Then I think to myself, why are they asking me that? Were they gonna shoot it in my house if it did? I mean, do you ask if a model car can drive you around? No, goat guns don't shoot. But they have the benefit of being a stress relief ball. Feeling the nice and smooth rack of the bolt landing on my mini AK-12 is the one thing keeping me sane at this point. It's called a manly toy, or big boy building blocks, because piecing and snapping them together allows me to go back to that nostalgic moment back when things were simpler. And it's the only thing my girlfriend lets me build now after I destroyed that last IKEA desk. Sorry about that. Goat Gun's 1/3 scale AK-12 has some real heft to it. It's made from die-cast metal. Click the link in the description or the pinned comment below to get your own AK-12 from Goat Guns today. But where did the AK-12 originally come from? And does its performance on the battlefield match the high expectations? Reports from Russian soldiers on the front lines in Ukraine indicated that the AK-12's bark might be worse than its bite. Photos circulated on social media showing cracked parts. Russian troops complained that the fire selector lever was too stiff and poorly designed, leading to slow reaction under fire or just outright selecting the wrong fire mode by accident. This post from a Russian soldier translated says, quote, "We received numerous questions about the AK-12's performance in the Special Operations Zone. The answer is that the performance is f***ing awful. It's such a bad gun that Spec Op brigades started taking old AKMs from storage. It doesn't allow for the installation of 99.9% of commercial suppressors, at least without an adapter, and installing that adapter leads to problems." And to be fair, problems like this with new rifles is one of the most common things we see when we look back at the history of new weapons, right? The American M16 and the British SA-80 infamously had early problems with reliability, and some of those issues were really never fully solved. But the Russian Special Forces VDV veterans that survived the opening days of the conflict reported that the front handguard of the AK-12, which was supposed to be sturdy enough to attach laser aiming modules to, was wobbly and unstable. Adding to the list of complaints were reports of wandering zeros, where reassembling the weapon after cleaning it would shift the rifle's point of aim due to the way that the top rail was held in place. Spetsnaz troops, Russian elite special forces, were setting aside their AK-12s for their former AKM rifle, because the new muzzle brake that was supposed to allow quick attachment of sound suppressors would only accept a specialized 6CH60 suppressor that was in short supply. Since this new muzzle brake wasn't compatible with any other suppressor models in the Russian arsenal, Spetsnaz soldiers that needed to run silent couldn't carry out their specialized missions if they didn't switch to an older platform. But the fact remained that something had gone seriously wrong in the translation of the AK-12 from the drawing board to the factory floor. Soldiers and defense analysts all over the world were initially very excited about the AK-12 when it was prototyped in 2011 alongside the Ratnik trials. Initial images of the prototypes entering testing showed a very Western-looking rifle due to its rail system and its new revolutionary proposed ability to be able to convert between calibers with a simple barrel change. But after running into budget concerns, the project morphed into a more realistic, back-to-basics design. So the next iteration of the AK-12 used proven AK design philosophy, meaning they ditched many of those revolutionary, maybe not quite ready yet ideas. So at this point, it became clear that the main upgrade seen on the AK-12 was its Picatinny rail system that could easily mount another piece of the Ratnik program, the optics. This included the 1P78 optic with a 2.8x magnification for accurate extended range shots. There was also the 1x close quarters 1P87 holographic optic that is said to be on par with the EOTech. Older models of the AK needed to either use an awkward side-mounted rail or aftermarket rails that added significant weight at the front of the gun, hampering the shooter's agility and endurance. The Russian Ratnik program and its equipment consists of 4 interlinked, interconnected subsystems, including attack, communications, body armor protection, and medical life support. These interconnected modular systems were so modular. But the problem with modularity is the whole system falls apart if one of those pieces isn't delivered. For example, the AK-12 becomes pointless if the optics are never created in mass numbers, as we'll see. The AK-12 did have some other nice upgrades though, combined a free-floated barrel that improved accuracy and a muzzle brake that could quickly add or remove a special designed sound suppressor. These would allow soldiers the flexibility to attach different optics and modules to the weapon for different missions while enabling them to hit targets at ranges of 400 plus meters, or close range and trench warfare. At 3.7 kilograms in weight and 875 millimeters long with the buttstock unfolded, the AK-12 is slightly heavier, but shorter than the old 74. The rate of fire on full auto is pretty standard at 700 rounds per minute, but the rifle shipped with a super fast 2-round hyper burst mode that was advertised to increase soldier accuracy at medium ranges by sending 2 rounds right after each other to double the hit chance. The Russian Ministry of Defense has been pretty enamored with this 2-round hyperburst concept ever since Project Abakan in the late 1980s resulted in the AN-94, so it wasn't a big surprise the idea made it onto the AK-12 as well. This time without the space-age magic pulley system that made the AN-94 an unreliable mess. During the AK-12's development, the quick change caliber conversion system was dropped in favor of keeping the 5.45 only design with a separate 7.62 version called the AK-15, entering service in much smaller numbers among special units like paramilitary forces. Frequent redesigns during development pared down some of the more revolutionary ideas seen on the first prototypes. Despite a bumpy development that had some questioning if the AK-12 would even be worth producing over existing rifles, the improved sights, greater flexibility, and better ergonomics were supposed to deliver a rifle that was more accurate and suited to the modern battlefield than the 49-year-old AK-74 series. While the AK-12 turned into a more iterative improvement over the 74 series than an all-out new wonder weapon, the production model of the rifle seemed to indicate a winning philosophy for the new Russian military. Right out of the box, the AK-12 would enable soldiers to use the advanced optics, night vision, and aiming modules promised in the coming years in ways that sticking to the old AK-74M would not. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced that they delivered 300,000 complete sets of the Ratnik equipment. The British Ministry of Defense even noted that there was enough now to equip every frontline Russian infantryman in Ukraine if that was true. The future looked bright for the average Russian soldier. But after many delays and corporate controversies because the design team from the Russian defense production company Izmash Factory was merged into the company of Kalashnikov to form Kalashnikov Concern. This is where future developments would take place. The Russian Ministry of Defense ordered 150,000 AK-12 units from Kalashnikov Group in 2018 to be delivered over a 3-year contract. The first 2,500 rifles entered service in December of 2018 and hit the battlefield in the Syrian civil war. Priority for the new rifle went to the VDV and select Rosgvardia units, the Russian National Guard. 37,000 were reportedly delivered by mid-2020, with another 10,000 finished by the end of that year. So far we're talking about maybe 50,000 completed rifles, but suspiciously afterwards, reports of finished AK-12s stop, and we're going to get into why that might be. The Moscow Victory Day parades showed VDV soldiers proudly marching with their AK-12 rifles, complete with 1P87 holographic sights, and by early 2022, it seemed like the Ratnik upgrades were here, and they were here to stay. However, February 2022 was a rude awakening for the Russian military. As Russian troops invaded Ukraine from 3 directions, the Russian ground forces appeared to encounter the same problems from their previous conflicts yet again. Large formations of troops and vehicles moved erratically or entered combat in 1s and 2s instead of as coordinated combined arms forces. This suggested that the communications equipment that was supposed to be delivered in the Ratnik program had not been adopted in widespread numbers. Infantry equipment found on captured Russian soldiers early in the war was inconsistent at best, with many soldiers in frontline battalion tactical groups still not having optics, night vision, or body armor. Ratnik was supposed to deliver the 1PN-138 monocular night vision scope, but the few examples that did make it off the factory floor were often of terrible quality, as this video shows, with peeling coatings, sealant leaks, and unsuitable battery types. Russian troops were found with civilian and Chinese radios instead of the encrypted AZART radios that they were supposed to have from Ratnik, leading to embarrassing cases of Ukrainian troops arguing with Russian soldiers over their own radio nets. Most Russian soldiers were still using AK-70M rifles when the 3-year contract for 150,000 AK-12s should have been delivered by 2022, which would have been enough to outfit 750 battalion tactical groups. Well, it's possible that the early performance information on the rifles in Syria in 2018 led to the Russian Ministry of Defense to decide not to issue the AK-12 in wider numbers for the invasion of Ukraine. It's possible poor performance issues with the initial weapons led to what we're about to see. At the same time, it turned out that many other portions of the Ratnik upgrade program seemed to be missing among actual combat units, leading some to theorize that Kalashnikov Concern might not be able to produce the AK-12 as quickly as they promised to the Ministry of Defense, or they were asked to stop. Initial reviews of the new AK-12 in combat prompted the Russian Ministry of Defense to call for a major redesign of many features into what's now known as the new 2023 variant. Moscow couldn't have their new premier rifle getting such a bad rap in such a high-profile war. Russia isn't making the AK-12 just for its own troops after all, but also for export market, with potential buyers in Armenia, Kazakhstan, Qatar, Belarus, Bangladesh, and Cameroon, to name just a few. With the clock ticking in Ukraine and with foreign buyers on the line, Russia quickly set about revising the AK-12 with feedback from the front lines. The new variant adds an adjustable cheek rest, improved fire selector, and safety levers that ditch that 2-round burst option, so the handguard and pistol grip have been strengthened, the rear sight was changed to a drum-style peep sight, and the muzzle brake has been changed to a new design that better interfaces with sound suppressors. Critics have called this a de-modernization of the AK-12 because features have been removed instead of added at this point. So when Russia canned that 2-round burst option from the AK-12, this was one of the most welcome changes among Russian troops testing the new variant. Basically, it didn't increase the buzzword lethality enough to be worth the increased annoyance. The AK-12 wasn't hot enough to be that crazy. The 2023 redesign was big enough news to get an article on CNN, which rarely follows military news this closely in weapons development. It basically suggests that the adjustments to the AK-12 have become a big enough issue to register on the broader public's radar. And we can learn a lot from seeing what the Russians have to say about this redesign. So Kalashnikov Group chief designer Sergey said to the Russian state-run media that the upgrade followed quote-unquote input gathered from experience of the gun's use in the special operation. He went on to say that the first batch of the upgraded AK-12s has already been delivered to the special military operation in Ukraine to specify the feedback. So basically, this is a very diplomatic way of speaking that he's using, where he's basically saying that they addressed some of the major problems that Russian soldiers were complaining about. The first production model of the AK-12 had both the fire selector and safety on the same lever, like old AK series weapons, which was both in a more awkward position and had so much spring tension that soldiers had a hard time going directly to the setting that they needed. So they would accidentally put it on burst when they meant to have it on single fire. Troops would have to remove their hand from a shooting grip and carefully click the lever into position if they didn't want a setting that was either all the way up or all the way down. This is to say, choosing your firing mode was finicky. Kalashnikov Group also claims to have improved manufacturing tolerances for a more accurate and reliable weapon, since early accuracy tests under field conditions showed the AK-12 to be at the same 3 to 4 minute of angle precision as the AK-74M. So the reason the Russian military switched had nothing to do with accuracy or have to do with performance really, it just comes down to that Picatinny rail system. Russian state media has yet to offer an explanation as to why so few AK-12s have been delivered, leading to accusations of further corruption and backroom dealing at play, so it's really anybody's guess as to how many rifles will actually make it into the field by the end of the Ukraine conflict. Still, the AK-12 has actually seen combat, which is more than you can say about some other Russian MOD projects like the T-14 and the Su-57. Russian gear like uniforms, sights, rifle parts, and other pieces of kit also have a nasty habit of showing up on eBay or foreign retailers' websites, so the corruption isn't all at the top, it's soldiers selling them on eBay too. Critics still argue the gun doesn't meet expectations set at the start of the project, pointing out that the biggest additions of the AK-12 could have been fulfilled with upgraded packages to the AK-74 for far less cost. By early 2023, AK-12 rifles are starting to filter into less elite Russian formations, but examples captured in Ukraine frequently don't have optics or major attachments either, causing analysts to speculate if the new rifle with a rail system really should have been a priority for the Russian Ministry of Defense, when the money might have been better spent acquiring more night vision, radios, or body armor for troops. Just as the AK-12 was indicative of what the Ratnik program was supposed to deliver, so was it a symbol of how things went off course. Military modernization projects are tricky business to begin with, especially when you have so many moving parts like the Ratnik program. Building a rifle to be ready for other components from different parts of the project is a great idea until those other components don't make it past a bureaucrat's office. Gunmakers can't predict the future as to which programs get canceled or don't get executed on. But AK-12 revisions could turn it into a more competitive platform. If the AK-12 had been delivered in wider numbers, along with high-quality optics and night vision, the adoption of the rifle would possibly have made a lot more sense and might have made a bigger impact during those crucial early days of Russia's 2022 invasion. Hey Spare Parts Army, I started a new podcast called Two Bros, One Bunker, where my buddy Patrick Baker and I talk about all of the world's complicated geopolitical problems with all of the finesse of a couple of lower enlisted guys. So there's a new episode out now if you want to check it out. The link's in the description and there should be a card on